Namaste everyone and welcome back to my channel Awaken with Padnyaa. And today I'm here in the 10th episode of Empower Hour. Today's episode is very unique. In the past 10 episodes, we have met different types of twin flames. As we say that every story is different, but what we are learning or the kind of journey we are on in the same. Sushmita and Achal met their twin flames when they were married. Tapasi and Ronak met their twin flame while being in their teens or their 20s. Justin and Michelle already came in union. Ela experienced her twin flame journey with her husband and went through a very extreme negative experience of dealing with the dark entities along with her spiritually awakened teenage daughter. And today, the person who is the guest speaker for the episode number 10, it's somebody who met her twin flame when she was on the pilgrimage to Mount Kailash along with her spiritual guru, a spiritual master. And later, she discovered that her twin flame was initiated in the monkhood. So this is some sort of a different matrix, a different type of a situation. And I myself have interacted with a lot of people who are going through this experience that they meet their twin flame and then they discover that the person they love the most is on the path of monkhood. You will understand that it is not at all easy to navigate with such a setup. I truly feel that this wonderful and beautiful lady has absolutely navigated her spiritual path and her spiritual journey with such wise discernment and such a positive attitude. And she definitely brings a lot of knowledge her way. How did she navigate through her journey? What sort of experiences she went through? How did she break out of her challenges? How her soulmate connections have helped her so far in her journey? How has she healed herself? And so much more. So, without wasting any time, I welcome Dee and I really thank her for coming here on this channel and sharing her story. Welcome, Dee.
Padnyaa. It's a real honor. And thank you for everything that you did, because in that first year of the journey, I don't know how many times I listened and re-listened and re-listened and re-listened to your videos. I needed to, because I felt like I was in quicksand and I just felt like I was being sucked in. I was drowning. So what you have done in terms of creating the content and putting it out there really saved me, really helped me. So I thank you for what you've done. If not for you, I wouldn't have accelerated and been here as quickly, because I don't know where I've got the resources from, because so much of the twin flame resources out there is such bullshit. It's all romanticized garbage. And so I think in many ways, the work that you're doing is a real deal. So thank you for being you, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, dear.
Appreciate you.
And thank you for connecting. I think such connections will go a long way in the collective. There is a reason why we are connecting. That's what I feel.
Yeah, definitely. Just for the sake of your audience, my name is Dee and I live in Vancouver, Canada. And I am originally from India. My parents are from South India, they're from Hyderabad. And we moved to Canada well over 20 something years ago when I was a teenager. So I've had a very strong upbringing and foundation in India, very rooted in that culture. I feel very, very connected to my motherland. But at the same time, I've had a Western upbringing and a Western education. So it's been very interesting for me on the spiritual path as well to straddle both worlds, because I really do feel that a big part of my own awakening is to bring the Eastern and the Western spirituality together. So there's no accident as to where I was born and then where I was raised. And I am married. I have a daughter, and I am an entrepreneur. I have always been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've never worked for anybody else. And that has been part of my own soul rebellion, just not to do anything in a prescribed way. So being an entrepreneur was a part of that path as well. So yeah, I think that's just a brief
That's
introduction.
wonderful. I definitely want you to share why did you feel that you had to share your journey? in the first place? Because there are so many people who are going through it, but they are not yet standing at that place where they are truly ready to express their truth or express or even talk about their personal experience. So what made you take that decision?
Yeah, and I can understand why they would want to do that. It's very scary to be public about something that is so intimate, because the twin flame journey is deeply intimate. It challenges every aspect of our existence, right? It's not just the fact that we fall in love with some other being and are in a difficult circumstance. It challenges our personal beliefs, our personal programs, our spiritual programs. I mean, it really like challenges everything and upheaves everything. So I can see why people don't want to do it. It took me a little bit of time even to listen to my own calling to do this. So really, I'm guided by my heart, and I think a big part of what the way I've been living is a completely heart-centered approach of being guided by my heart. And I was very much guided to do this interview. And I think what I've received in my guidance is that it's necessary for my story to be a part of the Twin Flame Collective, because I think it's going to help. It's because everything we do has a ripple that we can't even see. And then why specifically your channel, Padnyaa? Because you were the resource that helped me navigate the twin flame journey. Because when I came across it, I thought, when I was like right in the beginning of it, I thought I was totally losing my mind. It was so intense and I couldn't make head or tail of what was going on. And again, by divine guidance, somehow the YouTube algorithm recommended your channel to me. And I watched, I think, about 15 videos within 24 hours on a flight from India to Vancouver. And that was it. I understood, or at the very least, I started to understand. I can't say I understood fully. I started to understand that there is a framework here.
It really feels some sort of a validation for me when someone like you, who is reaching out to me and even telling this whole amazing synchronicity that you happen to see the channel and you felt like sharing the thing. Because when I started this particular segment called Empower Hour, this was my guidance coming to me that it's about throat chakra and there has to be a platform where you are providing people to come up and be in their truths in whatever way they can. And I really want to say this, that it is so credible. A person who is married, who has been on the twin flame journey, who is fully ready to express what she has gone through, it's amazingly amazing. The very common question which I would normally ask everybody, that how did your spiritual journey start? Because it's not necessary that it would start with a twin flame encounter. It might start even before that. So what was your experience?
My spiritual journey started a really long time ago, many, many years before I met my twin flame. I think it started when I was a child. I really have these experiences of growing up and feeling like I didn't belong, and really feeling like I had this experience of just looking at everybody and thinking that this is really strange. Like the way everyone's acting and the way they're showing up in their life is really strange. And somehow I just didn't belong in what they were asking of me, or what they were expecting of me didn't feel right for me. And I grew up in a very dysfunctional household, and I had a very painful childhood, and it was rife with a lot of neglect, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. I was sexually abused when I was 2.5 years old, multiple times. So I think there was many ways of like creating a shield around myself so I could protect myself during those times. But by the time I was a teenager, I could no longer escape it, because what started happening after we moved to Canada is that we were so isolated. Because in India, at least, you have community, right? Because we used to live in an apartment building, and I would just run down and play with 50 other children. And this community, there's always grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. But once we moved to Canada, it was very isolating. It was just my parents and I. And that's when it really started to unravel. So I think really the very beginning of my spiritual journey was probably at 19, because my mother would read Shirdi Sai Baba's Satcharitra a lot. And I remember I was in the throes of depression as a teenager. I had just started university, or as I was about to start university. So maybe it was 18 actually. I was about to go to university and I was very depressed that summer. And I started reading Sai Baba's Satcharitra. I think after I finished the Satcharitra, I had a dream where I was at Baba's feet and I could only see his feet. I couldn't see the rest of him, and I only had access to his feet. To me, that's very metaphorical because it was at the beginning of my journey. And it's almost like there was a dark, dark cloud where I couldn't see all of Baba, which is like I couldn't see the big picture. I could only see his feet. And then after that, somehow I coped with it. I went to university. Again, I was a complete misfit in university. I went to business school. The first year I did really, really well. I was on the dean's honor roll. It came very easily to me. I was a student leader. I was very dynamic. I won some of the top student leadership awards. I started a business conference that was way ahead of its time. And still, I don't know, some 12, 13, 14 years later, that conference is still in the same format. And I had won a very prestigious student leadership award. So everybody thought I was just brilliant student and was like at the top of her game. But in my second year, I'm not sure what happened. I could not participate in school anymore. I could not show up to classes. I could not do cost accounting. I just couldn't do any of that. And so then for about 3 years, I struggled. I stayed in university, but I didn't tell anybody that I was struggling because it wasn't safe. When you come from an Indian family, it's just expected that you have a degree. And for whatever reason, I was in such deep depression, and I was working with a school counselor at the time that I couldn't cope with university. So I actually dropped out and didn't tell anybody, definitely not my parents, because it wasn't safe for me. It's unheard of. Everyone in my family has gone to Ivy Leagues or IITs and IIMs, and my parents have double masters. And when you come from my type of family, education is everything. So dropping out of university meant that there's something really seriously wrong with you. And that's what I thought about myself as well, that there's something seriously wrong with me. However, the way I mitigated this, because I had no graduation to go to, is that I decided to leave and I said, hey, I'm going to be backpacking across the world for about a year. And this is what I'm going to do after my graduation. And so I didn't show up to graduation. And this was my way of doing it. But it was just something in me that was calling me to travel. And so I had saved up and I managed to backpack across the world. I think my first spiritual awakening happened during my travels because traveling as a solo young woman meant that I really had to activate a lot of discernment and intuition because, whether we like it or not, it's a man's world. It was then, it is still now. It's not particularly safe for women in many parts of the world. And for me to be able to travel in many parts of the world, in, South America, in parts of Asia, even in Europe, in Eastern Europe, I really had to exercise a lot of intuition. So I really had to connect with that deeper intuitive sense and read people and connect with people and understand people. And I would say that was really my first spiritual awakening. And then I returned when I was 23. And then I had my second awakening when I read Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, with my best friend. The both of us were reading it. And at the time, Oprah Winfrey, she was doing a live webcast. This was in 2008. She was doing a live webcast across the world for this book. And I remember reading this book. I remember like watching this ad on TV. This is when I just come back from my backpacking travels. And I knew I don't fit in. Like on that trip, I realized I'm just different. I always thought there was something wrong with me, that I could do what other people are doing. I can't finish a degree. I can't fit into my family. What makes everybody happy doesn't make me happy. But then, I was watching this ad on TV when I came back from my travels because I didn't know what to do next. And I saw Oprah advertise the book, and I called my best friend and I said, hey, we need to read this book. We need to be a part of this Oprah's book club and do this international book club where we read one chapter for 10 weeks. And when I read that book, it blew my mind because everything I had felt my whole life that I couldn't articulate in terms of words started to make sense. When Eckhart Tolle, the author, he talks about the ego, he talks about the pain body, he talks about the interaction of the ego and the pain body, and he talks about flow state of being in connection and awareness. it started to make sense. Everything made sense. And at one point, I read the book so many times that I had highlighted every sentence. And then I would say after that, I went a huge process of awakening. I also met my soulmate partner, who's now my husband, pretty much right after I came back from my backpacking and right after I had read Eckhart Tolle's book. We can get in a segment later. But I started reading a lot of spiritual books and meditating and doing things like that then. And at the age of 27, I met my spiritual master. I was initiated by him into Kriya Yoga, this beautiful, powerful, pure spiritual master. That's the year I also got married. And when I went to go see him, I thought I was going to see him at a personal development program. But then he initiated me into Kriya Yoga, and that really changed everything. So it was a process, I would say, between the age of 18 to 27, 28. It was a 10-year process of like slowly kindling a fire. So it was a long process.
You also said that when you got married, your husband has been like a very strong support for you.
Yeah, meeting my husband changed everything for me, actually, practically everything. I came back from my backpacking travels when I was 23, and I met my husband just right after my 24th birthday. So when I came back, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and at the time, I started a job as a receptionist at a civil engineering firm. Of course, my parents were pissed because they thought, how's it that you have a business degree and you're working as a receptionist? And I was like, no, this is just for me to decide what it is I want to do next. I don't necessarily want to get a corporate job. I couldn't be honest that I didn't have a degree. And then I met him when I was working there. And interestingly, when he saw me, he knew right away that he had met the woman that he wanted to marry. However, for me, I didn't even recognize him till he was there for about the fifth time. So that the place I was working was a civil engineering company. And that was his client because he had an IT consulting firm that he had just started a couple of years ago. So then I was like, oh, who's this guy who keeps coming back for the IT guy? And then one day we just connected because I was reading a book that he recognized. It was an economics book called The White Man's Burden. And he said, hey, I know this book. I've been meaning to read it. And I thought, oh, wow, like an intelligent person. Because also after I'd come back from my backpacking trip, just wasn't interested in boys. Like I was 23, 24. I didn't want to date guys my age. They all seemed so immature because I had such a big spiritual awakening on that trip. Like traveling across the world solo is an awakening. It's a spiritual awakening because there's so many things you have to deprogram yourself of. Because the most important thing you realize is that there is the one humanity. That itself is a deprogramming. It's like so many things that are built in based on religion, based on your caste, based on your nationality. And I managed to deprogram a lot of that while I was traveling. That there was the one humanity and there is no right or wrong because what is considered right in my culture is very wrong in another culture. What is considered right in their culture is very wrong in my culture. But does it mean that they're not here to do something that's sacred or powerful? So it made me question many things. So when I came back, I was very open. I was very broken open in many ways. And so when I met my future husband, he was also like me, but he was Canadian. He is half Irish and half Bajan. So he's not from the Indian culture. And he was very unconventional. He also had dropped out of university. He had many struggles. He always felt like he didn't fit in. He also traveled, just like I did when he didn't know what to do. And then he came back and he started a business and became an entrepreneur. And he was also making a film at the same time. So he was very free-spirited like me in many ways. And for the first time, I felt like I found a kindred spirit, somebody that could actually understand me. And he was the first person that I had told that, hey, I actually don't have a university degree. I dropped out. I mean, it made no difference to him. He just understood me. And he said, I understand. We both realized that our souls were in rebellion. Like we both did not fit in to this world. We both felt very different. We couldn't fit into the education system because later on in my life, when I stopped beating myself up and thinking that I was weird and couldn't even finish a degree, I realized that the reason I couldn't finish my degree is because I didn't want to be programmed. 4 years of university education is very deep programming. It programs you to be a cog in the machine. especially if you do a professional degree like business or law, or whatever, you're getting programmed to be a cog in this capitalistic machine. So I realized that it was my soul in rebellion. And I was able to see that because my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, mirrored it to me through shared experiences. I was a student at the time because I decided to go back to school and dropped out a second time. But at the time, he kind of really took me under his wing because I didn't have a whole lot of money and I had left home. And I started, I think, living with him within the first year. Again, I had to hide it from my parents. Like everything was like this double life, you couldn't share things with the Indian family. But he really took care of me. He really took care of me. And the other thing is because I grew up in an environment that was so abusive. What happens is when you have so much deep trauma within you, it's like a coil. It's a spiral. It's a repressed coil. So what's going to happen to a repressed coil when you when you release it, right? It's going to start springing out this way. And that's exactly what happened to my trauma because I had no way of expressing that trauma. It was so repressed and so suppressed that when I finally felt safe with him, somebody that I could be with somebody that's safe and just be honest about who I was, this coil started to just like suppress. And so I actually went through very serious mental health issues. I was very suicidal, and he had to like talk me off the ledge many times. He took me to my first counselor, and I started counseling for the first time. I would say that's also a part of the spiritual process because the spiritual process really is a healing process for a majority of people. And I think many that have been on the twin flame journey are very aware that what you're really doing is you're healing, even if you didn't know that you needed the healing. But for me, it started a long time ago. It started at the age of 25 because I was immensely suicidal and very depressive and very depressed and would go through very deep depressive episodes till I was initiated into Kriya Yoga by my guru. So that's what changed everything for me. So what I found during that time is that my husband's support was invaluable because it was like he was the tree of life and I could just rest under his shade and heal. So I was wounded. I had all these battle scars, all these deep wounds, and I could just rest under that shade. It's not that our relationship was easy, but it was exactly what I needed during that time. And he truly never questioned because, like I didn't even have the financial resources. So he would pay for a lot of things, including courses and anything I wanted to do. He would just give me the space to do. So truly, he's a true soulmate in every which way. I mean, I feel so grateful.
He literally prepared you in your initial readiness to encounter your twin flame. Whatever was supposed to be purged or healed in the pre-phase of your twin flame encounter, I think he really played that crucial role in your life. And I think only soulmate can do that.
I know a lot of times people give a lot of credit just to the twin flame, but I think it's
Yes,
really important that we always look at all of the people that have assisted us because there's always soulmates and they don't always have to show up as
absolutely.
a husband. So I've had a soulmate friend who was a big part of my healing journey. So it's really important that we pay attention to all those people that are coming to assist and to help in this journey. When I was actually turning 30, just before my 30th birthday, I went for an experiential program. So my mom and I, we had both gone. Interestingly, my mom is also a soulmate. So she was a part of like the reason why I was so messed up in the first place from my childhood, because she was very unawakened and in a lot of pain. And then she inflicted a lot of pain on me. But she and I found my spiritual master at the exact same time. And she really, really wanted to awaken. So she threw herself into the Kriya Yoga as well and into her own healing process. And as a part of her own healing process, our relationship healed over a very long period of time. I think it took us about 15 years or something like that to really heal our relationship. So she's been a very big part of my spiritual process as well. So interestingly, my mother has been a soulmate, not necessarily just the victimizer. So my mom and we had gone to that spiritual retreat together. And after that, I took her to the Smoky Mountains. This is in the US. And it was so powerful. Like I had this experience where we were driving through the Smokies, and the Smokies are one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world. And the way you know this, I think about like 2 million years ago, the tectonic plate of Africa collided into North America, giving rise to the Smokies. And the way that we know that these are the oldest mountain ranges is that they're almost perfectly rounded at the top. And there's a lot of indigenous populations that used to live in the Smokies because they were very spiritual people. They were people of the land. And even now, there's many native reserves there. So we went there because I heard it was beautiful from one of my best friends. And so I took my mom there. She needed it as a part of her own healing. And, we both had this experience, but especially me, because I had come out of this very powerful program with my spiritual master. I had this experience of becoming one with the mountains. And everything was in like psychedelic, like everything was in this like other fifth dimensional. I'm using the term now. I didn't know that term when I was 29 years old, but everything was like heightened, and like the butterflies were heightened, the water was heightened. And that was my first experience of just kind of like stepping into a different realm and becoming one with everything around me and seeing the magic. And I even remember when we were driving, we were leaving the Smokies and we had to drive to Atlanta to catch a flight to get home back to Canada. I actually miscalculated the amount of time it was going to take me to Atlanta. And we were driving through very narrow mountain roads, that have hairpin bends. So you got to be careful. And so the speed limit there is 30 miles an hour. I remember something like taking over my body and driving the car at 60 miles an hour in perfect control. And sometimes I'd like take my hands off the wheel to see if I was still driving it. And I was like, no, I'm not driving this car. Much later, I realized that was an example, that was an experience I had of my higher self taking over. It was like a very high dimensional presence that was taking over and just driving, literally metaphorical, well, driving the car, literally driving the car, but it was also metaphorically driving the car of my life, right? And that was my very first experience of this like awakening, but it's not something I earned because it was something that because of my spiritual master, he was able to like lift the veil and I was able to see beyond the veil over the 4 days. And it lasted for about a month. And that's how I I went into my 30th birthday with like that because I was so deep. Even when I came home, I was very connected with the trees. And I tell my husband, let's go walk in the forest. And I'd be hugging the trees, and I was just one with the trees, and I would be in tears with the trees. And like he never told me, my husband is such a beautiful soul. Like he never told me I was crazy. He just let me have my experience. He couldn't relate to it, but he just let me have my experiences and he would just support them. It's such a beautiful, expansive soul that he could hold all of that. I think most other people would be like, what's wrong with you? Like you're losing your mind. So that happened in 2014. And after that, I came back into 3D. I started having that density again in my body, not that like expansiveness where I was connected with the trees and the cosmos, started coming back slowly into density again. And I remember my heart just sinking. Like I didn't want to come back into that density, that heaviness, that pain. But I knew I couldn't spiritually bypass it. Like that I hadn't earned. It was like I was shown a peak beyond the veil. And now I need to earn it for myself. Like I need to experience this myself through my sadhana and my practices. And so after that, it was just I dived into the deep end with Kriya Yoga, and I was such an intense yogi that I would do like 3 hours of practices every single day. Just kept building and building and building and building. And then in 2020, I went to just before COVID hit, I went to India to do a silent program with my spiritual master. It was an 8-day silence program. And I even remember as I was preparing, I was doing almost 7 hours of sadhana daily. And as I was preparing for that program, I would see this big veil above my head. And I was like, what is this veil? I think this veil is like shielding me from the truth. Um, and in my sadhana, I was trying to like lift the veil or like kick it off me, but I couldn't. I did go into the silence program and had a very powerful experience where I was working with the energies of Shiva, the being, and he was working on my third eye, just constantly trying to open my third eye. And then when I came out of that program, the veil had lifted, that blanket. And that was a huge step in my spiritual awakening, because I just woke up. I woke up. It's not that I awakened completely and became enlightened, but I woke up. There's many things up to that time that I wouldn't have been open to, that I started to be open to, like extra dimensional phenomena, etc. And then within a year of that, I found out that I was a star seed and that I had come here for a specific purpose. Until then, I wouldn't even entertain stuff like that. Like about 2 years ago, when a friend of mine tried to tell me about other dimensional beings, I'd just be like, I don't want to hear about this, okay? Because to me, there was only this planet, this earth. I'm a human being, and I have a big karmic profile and karmic suitcase. I need to work it out. I just need to focus on Kriya Yoga. And this is how I was. It wasn't in my experience. And my spiritual master always said this, that if it's not in your experience, don't believe it, because otherwise you're just hallucinating. But after that silence program, a lot of things started to come into my awareness. Really magical, mystical stuff. And I started waking up to my own magical, mystical gifts of who I was. And I started doing energy healing with an energy healer in addition to my daily sadhana. So I actually was starting to purge lower vibrational frequencies out of my body. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. So limited beliefs, limited patterns. So I had already started that process. I was doing it through Kriya, but through the energy healing, and I was also doing some coaching. I was doing a program called Thinking into Results by Bob Proctor with a coach. And that really changed many, many things for me, the combination of the energy healing and that, because I started to realize how much programming we have as human beings and how that limits our experience of life and how it limits how we see ourselves and how we show up in the world.
After all this healing process and meeting your husband, many people will be definitely waiting for this question, that how did you meet your twin flame and how did that actually unfold?
So ironically, it happened on a pilgrimage, and because everyone thinks, well, you go on a pilgrimage to surrender yourself to God, but you can also go on a pilgrimage and surrender yourself to your twin flame.
True.
It's not something that I was expecting. I never expected something like that to show up in my life. It truly came out of the blue. Then in 2022, I decided that I was going to go on a pilgrimage with my spiritual master to the Himalayas. And it's something that I had been planning for 5 years. But, during that period of time, I had a baby. My husband went on that same pilgrimage with my master because he's also been initiated by our teacher. And he had been in 2018, but then I had a baby and my daughter was only 2 at the time. So I couldn't go. And then I was preparing for the silence program. And then COVID hit, and for 2 years, there was no activity, right? So in 2022, I had this one thought, like, is this my year? Should I really be going? Because they were going to go to Mount Kailash, but essentially because Tibet was closed that year, they couldn't make it to Tibet. So, which means we'd have Kailash darshan from Nepal. And I thought, do I really want to do that? Like, I would like to go to Mount Kailash. I would like to actually go to Tibet and be at the base of Mount Kailash. When I sat in meditation, the guidance I received is, no, this is your year. You have to go. This is your year. And it was just a clear knowing. So by this time, I had already, thanks to the awakening from post the silence program, the veil lifting, and working with the energy healer, waking up to being a starseed, I understood that there was such a thing as a higher self, and that the higher self is always guiding you. So when that guidance came through, I didn't question it. I just went on that journey. Interestingly, that year, 2022, I had gone to the UK for a spiritual retreat with a different teacher. He's a starseed teacher. I was there for 2 days, and then I met a woman, and she kept telling me her story about how she was a twin flame. And then I heard 2 other people tell me their stories about being twin flames. So I heard the word twin flame come up 3 times that year. I had never heard the word twin flame prior to that. And interestingly, I had no curiosity to look it up, because my sense was that in spiritual circles, there is a lot of like woo-woo. And I just thought twin flame is one such woo-woo thing, So I heard it and I had empathy towards the woman because she was on a twin flame journey and she was in a lot of pain. And she kept telling me how she was with a twin flame partner, but they just broke up because it became really abusive and toxic. And she told me her whole life story, but it did not resonate with me. And it did not. So I never Googled the term, even though I heard it three. And then in September 2022, I ended up on the pilgrimage. And it was a group of 34 people with our teacher, and we were traveling through the Himalayas. So it was a beautiful, powerful pilgrimage was about to start. On the second day, we had this beautiful darshan with our master. And then we got on a bus because we were going to go to some temples as a part of the pilgrimage. And my mom had come on this pilgrimage as well with me. And I was sitting on the bus next to her and we were talking. And then I suddenly look over and there's one of the people that are on the team, volunteers that travel with our master, jumped on the bus. And I looked at him and I was just like, I couldn't stop looking at this person. I was like, wow, who's this guy? Like, I literally thought that in my mind. Wow, who is this guy? I just thought he was so cute and so attractive. And then I thought, what's going on? Like, it's like, okay, well, whatever. Some cute guy jumped on the bus. Like, okay, no big deal. Because there's a part of me that had to catch myself right away. It's like, what is going on? Why am I so attracted to this person? And interestingly, later when I saw him again, I felt like there was like light coming out of him. This is like he was emanating light. And anyways, I didn't think much of it. I just kind of let it go. And the next day, we had to all get on flights and we had to move from one part of where we, like from one town that we were into another town, because that's really where the long stretch of the journey was starting. So we got on these little planes. Then we got off at the next destination. And there we were going to take these trucks, like these overland vehicles, and cut through the mountains to head to our next destination. So these, because we're in the Himalayas and the mountains, I mean, there's no roads, right? So we had to basically take these SUVs, and there was a local drivers who were going to be driving us, and we're like driving by these narrow mountain passes with like waterfalls. You're like driving under waterfalls. It was really powerful. It was really intense. And then about 2 hours into that journey, everybody took a washroom break. And then the volunteer, he came and he joined the car. He came and he sat in my car. So the main volunteer said, hey, he's just going to come join this car because they're taking turns in different cars. And I remember kind of feeling a little bit sick. I was just resting. But I even remember the moment that he came and sat in the car, I was just like, oh, okay. And I sat up. And it was like immediately, like everything about me just came to life. It's almost like I had a spontaneous healing of some sort after he came and he sat in the car. And through that journey, we started talking to each other. And he had told me about how he ended up as a volunteer and what his story was, and how he grew up with a single mother and the father had left them. And that by the time he was 17 or 18, he really had to step out and help start to make some money and help the family, et cetera, et cetera. And then, just like me, he found our spiritual master at the age of 27. So I realized he was 6 years younger than I was. So he had been initiated by our spiritual master at the age of 27, just like I was. And so it was interesting to notice all these parallels. And anyways, we were journeying on this like 10-hour long journey. And over the journey, we really got to know each other. And I even remember we were playing songs for each other, and we realized we had the same taste in music. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, like there's something very attractive about him on all levels. And I couldn't help but be completely involved with him. And interestingly, when I was in the car, I couldn't tell him I was married and I had a child. We were talking about our entire life story, but I couldn't tell him I was married with a child. And part of me was like, what is happening here? Why is my throat chakra closing? Why am I not able to tell him the truth? Anyways, we got to that hotel, wherever we had to get to in the mountains, our next stop. And there there was still this like flirtation between us. And that night when I was going to bed, I was thinking like, okay, Dee, like you cannot, you cannot continue this. Like you have to put a break on this. What is happening? But interestingly, because we were on a pilgrimage, I also started purging the next morning. The next morning, I woke up at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had to sit up in bed and I was just like purging lower frequency energies. At the time, I didn't know that I was purging. I could just feel like things leaving me. It's kind of like an experience I had in energy healing, but very, very intense, like a full on purge. And that happened to me every day of that journey, which was over 2 weeks. And then for about a week, I avoided my twin flame on that journey because, well, I couldn't understand why I couldn't tell him the truth. And I felt like such a fraud and felt kind of deceitful and felt a bit guilty that I was so madly attracted to him. And then I thought, okay, I'm just going to have to avoid him. And during that 1 week that I was avoiding him, and yes, we'd smile at each other or whatever, but I stopped having conversations because we had those very in-depth conversations. And I felt I couldn't go any deeper. And as we were traveling through really remote parts of the Himalayas, through the Annapurna range, and we're hiking and, going through caves where other great masters, Buddhist masters, got enlightened, and we were meditating in these caves. It really was something else. I would constantly see a vision of us, my twin and I, as lovers. There was always this image where I'd see him and me as a tribal man and woman. And he had these silver cuffs around his wrists and his ankles. And he had these silver earrings that were rings. And I kept seeing us as lovers. I could never see myself. I could only see him. And then at one point, I just came to the conclusion that I was like, oh, I guess I have a deep past life connection with this person. And that's why he's shown up right now, because there's something that I need to resolve. Because I've had that experience over the years on the spiritual path where people from past lives have shown up. And I was given a vision about a past life and I had to resolve it. And that's the conclusion that I came to. And long and short of the story is, at the end of the first week, I no longer could avoid him. Like something about my higher self just kept pushing me towards him. And there was a point in the journey where the entire group of 34 plus volunteers, because of weather conditions in the Himalayas, we got split into 4 groups. And so one group ended up in one town, and we were stranded there because of weather conditions for about 24 hours. And when we first arrived there, because we were going to have a full moon initiation, Kailash initiation, so we had to get to that point where we could have the Kailash darshan with our spiritual teacher. We were stranded the day before in this one town. And there was a group of 8 of us, and my twin was a part of that group. And my higher self just kept pushing me towards him. So I stopped avoiding him at this point, and I started moving towards him. And I even remember for the week that I was avoiding him, I felt like deep longing, like I felt like I was missing him. You know that thing that happens during separation, that missing feeling? I started to develop that feeling. And later on, I realized that, oh, what we experienced was a mini separation, and what I was experiencing, that was that intense purging after that first interaction. But it's only later when I clued into the twin flame journey. For the remaining 1 week, we were always around each other because my higher self kept guiding me towards him, and he was very receptive towards it. And it was really the most magical 1 week. And even the place that we were stranded in, there was an Amman temple, a Devi temple there, a Shakti temple. It was a Shakti Peeth. And so the both of us, we ended up going to that temple. Again, later, one of the things that my guide showed me is that was really important, because a lot of pilgrims, they go to that temple first before they go to Kailash. And interestingly, it was not on our route. It's just that we got diverted there because of weather conditions. And again, later on, I realized there is no accidents, that my twin and I, we were meant to be there because we received an activation from the Shakti Peeth, from the Devi. And then we went to Kailash together. And then it was interesting, after the Kailash initiation, things just accelerated. So our spiritual master gave us a third eye initiation at Kailash. And after that, the things just accelerated because we were on this truck and we were heading back from the Kailash darshan, from like 17,000 feet down to, I think, 12,000 feet. We were on this truck, and it was on that truck that we first held hands. I think within about 3 or 4 days, we ended up kissing each other. The first time he kissed me, it felt like my body was on fire, like electric currents were surging through my body. And I had to pull back and I was like, what is this? And I even told him, what is this? Like, why do I feel like I'm on fire? And it was the most intense experience. It's kind of like, again, later I realized it's like such a deep soul connection that everything around about being with this being was electric, because it was like an electric, like it was an electrifying experience spiritually, but also physically. And then about 3 days later, on the very last day of the trip, we ended up having sexual intimacy. And that was a very profound experience for me personally. And one of the visions I was shown later by my guides, once I realized that I'm on a twin flame journey, is that they showed me that there was an invisibility cloak around us. So the entire time that we were interacting with each other, it was almost like we were invisible to other people. They couldn't see us. And then that's when I started to clue into the magic and the mysticism of this relationship and the power of this relationship. And at every step of the way, like as things were happening and unfolding between us, my heart was guiding me. My higher self was propelling me. Like it was so clear that this is what I had to do. To me, there was no question that this is not what I should be doing. And I wasn't operating from the filter of morality at all. Like it didn't feel wrong to me. It just felt right.
Yeah.
And interestingly, though, after we had intimacy, like right after, a whole wall went up between us, and he actually cried, and I didn't understand why he cried, and I asked him what's going on, and he said, "You know, I am actually on the path of monkhood. I am going to become a monk." And I was really confused. I did not understand what he was saying. After that, we left and we went to a temple, a Shiva temple, and that's why we separated from each other. I had experienced this whole wall go up right after the intimacy, because I think what happened for him, and this is what I found out later, that he had been on the path of becoming a monk for a year and a half. So there's a very intense preparation process that they have to go through in order to become a monk. It's very focused, very intense, very involved. And I think what happened is that the guilt kicked in for him, and that's when the wall went up. And then about 3 days later, I saw this vision where energetically I just saw him facing me, and then he turned his back towards me and walked away. And that was really the second separation, I'd say, and immensely painful. And after that, when I came home, I went back to energy healing because I was trying to figure out what was going on, because I just thought, okay, this was something that happened and we move on with our lives, but I couldn't move on. Something had cracked open that I had never experienced in my life before. It's very hard to explain it. I had this like desperate need to connect with him. I was really missing him. And coming back home to my family, to my husband, to my daughter, like I felt so disconnected from everything. Interestingly, I would keep having visions of him in meditation. And I just thought, like, I can't make head or tail of this. And there was like a huge process of purging that was happening, like massive process of purging. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how we met on a pilgrimage under very interesting circumstances.
This is the amazing thing that you shared about the intimacy, and it really takes courage to talk about it being a married person on a public platform. And many people ask me this question, that is it really right to have physical intimacy with your twin flame? And I always feel that it's not your choice. If it is supposed to be happening with your twin flame, it will happen. And I think your story is a classic example of that. It was not about you choosing it or he choosing it, it was just supposed to happen. And it happened, and you cannot really look at it from the moral compass. Some people might even say that, oh, you are just finding some excuse to have something to whom you are getting attracted to. But those who are going through this experience would understand the difference, that if it is a divine intervention, that physical intimacy will happen. And you cannot really look at it from this whole perspective of getting attracted to somebody. It definitely has a very deep, profound spiritual and energetic reason why that happens. And Thanks for sharing that.
But one thing I want to add to that is that, we are multidimensional beings, especially for twin flames.
Yes,
We're master souls. We've come here to be in personal mastery, but we'll also come here to wake up so that our consciousness then assists in the waking up of the larger consciousness. That's really
yes,
how we are here to serve. And that's why many of us have had very challenging lives and very challenging paths. And the twin flame path itself is an excruciatingly painful path. It's not an easy path. This is not for the faint of heart, right? I've had this perspective, luckily, from 2020, since I awakened after my silence program, is that because we're multidimensional beings, yes, in the third dimension, there is morality, there are rules, there are laws. But when you look at everything from a multidimensional perspective, all of
absolutely.
this human-made reality, it's all garbage, because the even with the twin flame, like the what I was shown was that the intimacy that we had was an activation. It activated certain aspects of our mission, and it could have only happened through intimacy. Because, in the third dimensional perspective, intimacy is considered dirty, it's considered wrong, it's considered immoral, it's considered so many things.
Yeah,
However, from the purpose, what we really did is that we channeled our sexual energy, and the sexual energy is nothing but the kundalini. This is the creative force that created the universe. Everything that we're considering as wrong and dirty in terms of having sex, what is that propelled by? That is propelled by sexual energy. And that sexual energy is the Shakti. It's the Shakti that created the cosmos. So it's like a huge deprogramming, when you start to deprogram yourself and you understand, and there's a reason that sexual energy is repressed on this planet. Because if everybody was allowed to connect deeply with that Shakti inside of them, that is our inner Shakti. It's not about the Amman temple outside, which is the Shakti. We are suppressing our inner Shakti and bowing down at the Amman temple, you know.
so true.
It's ironic. So we have to learn to connect with that inner Shakti, and that inner Shakti is the Kundalini. It is the sexual force that is within us. So if we know how to channel it and move it for a higher purpose, then that is the cosmic energy. That's the energy that created the entire cosmos. We get to tap into our own creative energy and our force if we don't repress our sexual energy. But there's not a lot of education about that, right? Like, how does the average person do that? Like, I have been lucky enough to have teachers and to have guides that have showed me how to work with it. But otherwise, how does the average person even know? They don't. So then they succumb to that societal repression. And trust me, I've had to go through that journey as well, because I've had shame about it and I've had guilt about it, especially because my partner is such a beautiful partner and a soulmate partner. And it would have hurt him like very deeply to find out that, technically I had intimacy with another man. But because I'm able to see this multidimensional perspective, it just gives, like, at least on the twin flame journey, we have to understand there is a multidimensional aspect to everything that we're doing.
Absolutely.
And wherever we feel fear or guilt, it's important we look at it. We look at it. That's where the shadows are. That's where the repression is. And that's where the programming is. So I think that's exactly why I was guided to share the story, because not a lot of people will talk about the fact that they, had intimacy with another man while being married.
So when you had this encounter, you went into this whole pain process and you went back home. How did you deal with your married life? Or what were the how have you navigated those? It must have been definitely challenging, but the good part is that you were already understanding that you are a multi-dimensional being and there is nothing wrong with whatever you did. That was the best part of, or the better part of the whole scenario. But still, you were a human being and you were still holding the third dimensional responsibility to be in a marriage. So, how was that phase of your life?
It was really challenging because A, on one level, I was purging so intensely. B, I didn't understand what this obsession with this other being was, because I was absolutely obsessed with him and stalking him on social media all the time and waiting for him to come online and whatnot. And then C, it's like if you stop paying attention to your family, they notice it, right? So it was a really tough one to navigate. And interestingly, I tried to tell my husband about 5 months after the pilgrimage. I tried to explain it to him. So I told him that I had met somebody and that it's a spiritual, like divine counterpart called a twin flame.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Oh, okay, interesting." And then I was like, "What's wrong with you? Like, how come you're just saying it's interesting?" He's like, he's like, "Who cares? At the end of the day, you're coming back to me, right? So what does it matter if you just met some divine counterpart and you had a divine expression or a divine connection? At the end of the day, we're together, right? As long as you did." And then he said, "As long as you didn't go off to a hotel room with him, what do I care?" I was just like, "Oh my God." And I just froze. And then about 4 or 5 months later, Spirit asked me to tell him. And so I did. And I started explaining the encounter more and started to kind of touch upon the fact that we, you know, had intimacy. And my husband just erupted. And ironically, Spirit asked me to tell him on our 11th wedding anniversary. This was about 1 year ago. And oh my God, my husband just erupted. Like I have never seen him that angry. But because Spirit guided me and my higher self guided me, I just did it. And I don't know how we navigated that. It just like it's a divine miracle. Because I spoke my truth to him, somehow the divine caught me. And then we were able to work through it with a marriage counselor, etc. And since then, I've tried to share with him aspects of the journey, and I've tried to explain that this is not mutually exclusive. Because, when I do, because some of the work that I do is also multidimensional. So I go to different parts of the world and I heal the earth and heal the planet and heal certain grids and clear energetic fields, et cetera, et cetera. And I've seen many times since I was started on the twin flame journey that it's both my husband and my twin flame on either side who are working with me on this work. So I personally started to realize it's not mutually exclusive. Like I had to awaken to that to myself because I was so deeply in love with this other being. In my human mind and programming, it's like if I'm so deeply in love, I need to go be with him. But of course, that's not an option. He's on the path of becoming a monk. And then with my own husband, I kept thinking, how can I be in a relationship with him if I experience such deep love for somebody else? But as a part of my deep programming and my healing, I started to realize that love, the way human love is, yes, it can only be given to one person and the other person. But as I've been healing and my heart chakra has been healing, I've realized there's only one love. Love is one thing. It's a state that human beings live in. You don't compartmentalize and give it to one person or to another person. Love is all inclusive. It includes every being. And so, as my heart chakra started to open, I started to live deeper and deeper in the heart chakra and heal the heart chakra. I just realized that there's only one love. My love for my twin flame is the love for my husband. It's just in my human mind, I have to make compartments. If I remove those compartments, it's just the relationship with my husband is unique. But my husband doesn't understand that yet. He's a powerful spiritual being himself. And that's why he's able to even hold this container with me. But when I tried to explain it to him, the deep divine connection, he said, "Look, Dee, I can't compete with a soul connection. So it always makes me feel like I'm number two, that I'm second on this list." So when he expressed that to me, I realized I need to exercise some discernment because, in my mind, I kept feeling I need to be transparent. I just need to tell him everything. Then I realized, the thing about navigating multiple dimensions is that you have to have discernment. And a big part of that discernment is knowing what somebody is ready for. My husband's not ready there. Yes, he's clearly ready enough to acknowledge that I have a soul connection, and he's okay with that, right? But he doesn't want to know all the details because in his mind, he still has a ladder. I don't have a ladder anymore because that's a third dimensional ladder. In the fifth dimensional, there's no ladder. We're all one being in that sense. And that's my experience. So yes, it's been challenging, But the important thing to understand is that I really followed my higher self's guidance at every step of the way, because I was convinced after my higher self guided me to tell him about like intimacy and stuff. And I couldn't tell him the whole story, but I did tell him. So he knew that we kissed and we had some level of intimacy. I realized that following the higher self helps you deep, like, I don't know how to explain it. It's important to follow the higher self's guidance. Even though it feels like it's going to destroy your life, it opens up something and energetically changes something on the planet because it's a deprogramming. It's about coming into our truth. And it's so important we speak our truth. And Pragnya, one of the things I have to say is that you played a really important role in the journey. And, I like a big part of how I found you was, I think 4 months into the journey, I had gone to India to do some work with my spiritual teacher. And I ran into my twin flame. And I was starting to just then realize what a deeply powerful connection this is and what the sense of this connection is. And then I found your channel and I watched all the videos, and then it made complete sense to me. I started understanding. But one of the things you said in the video, one of your videos, was that it's really important that you tell your twin flame the truth. You speak your truth to them, because until you've told them your truth, the journey doesn't even start. So I did express to my twin flame that I loved him, and he told me that he knew. He knew, and he never expressed his love back to me, but I know because I've seen it in his eyes many times. I've heard it in his voice. Um, you know, so I think on this journey, if anything, like over and over again, I've always been the type of person to speak my truth, but it's made me reinforce that over and over and over again. And it's scary, but it's necessary. I don't think we can spiritually bypass speaking our truth, because that's why we've incarnated here. That's why we've come into such rigid societal structures, because when we speak our truth, we break those structures. Yes, it can have consequences. If my husband wasn't as understanding as he was, I would have been divorced by now and a single mother. So I do understand consequences, but I think we've come here to take risks. That's my opinion, at least. That's my life experience, not my opinion. It's my truly lived life experience.
I can't thank you enough, because I think I sometimes have this feeling when I'm talking on my channel that, oh my God, like there is nobody else standing besides me to say the same thing. How long I will just keep screaming about the same thing, this particular thing, that you have to listen to your higher self and follow what your higher self is telling you. You have to overcome your fears, you have to take risks, and you have to face the consequence, because unless you do that, you cannot really break through any other next milestone that may be coming into your journey. You never reach that milestone because you are always stuck in that loop. Going forward, what happened next? About your husband and that marriage scenario, also, I want to say that you followed your guidance. You took that risk because your spirit told you to share that experience with him. I had exactly the same experience in my journey, and I trusted it, and I also faced the consequences where my husband was upset. But ultimately, exactly the way you shared, I always have this vision in my mind that my journey is not only with my twin flame, but my husband also is one of the pillars of what I signed up for along with my twin flame. So it was never like only me and my twin flame, but my husband also plays a very, very important role. As I see a lot of people struggling between these two people in their life, and they are not able to respect their karmic marriage. Especially, I hate this word karmic because it kind of indirectly puts the whole equation in some hierarchy that, oh, this is not right, or this is not really up to the mark. I feel that whatever it is, whatever you label that connection, ultimately that is not random. You have chosen that person in your soul journey, and that person also holds equal importance and equal love at the same time, the way you said.
The one thing I want to add to that is that, it's really important, because on the twin flame journey, so much importance is just given to the twin flame. But remember that the twin flame journey is no different than a spiritual journey. Like, we are on a spiritual journey. The twin
Yes.
flame happens to be a component of it. I think in my own experience, I had all of my awakening much before my twin flame came around. What he did is that he accelerated that awakening in a way that I couldn't even believe it was possible, the speed of acceleration. But on the spiritual journey, every single person that comes into our life is a part of the soul family, even if they are victimizing us in some way, you know.
Yeah.
It's important to understand that everybody that comes into our life is here to be a teacher and is here to hold a mirror to us, to show us where our shadows are, where our wounding is, where our limited beliefs are, where we are acting like the victim. So if we attribute everything to the twin flame, then we're missing the entire journey, truly,
Yeah.
because then we're missing the opportunities to learn from everybody, everybody. So, so I think I would urge everybody to start expanding your understanding that every single person that's coming into your life, whether it's your mother-in-law, whether it's your maid, whether it's your daughter, or your son, or your pet, or your husband, or your ex-husband, or your sister-in-law that's victimizing you, whoever this is, they've come here to be a teacher. They're probably showing you and mirroring to you that you're not playing in your power if you're allowing yourself to get victimized, right? So I don't know what the lesson is, but the important thing is that they're here to teach you. Do you know how to learn, and are you willing to learn? So let's not make the twin flame journey all about just the twin flame. Then it's
Thank you for saying
then
that.
we're
Yeah.
losing opportunities to learn. And we can only accelerate this awakening and take our power back if we're willing to learn from everything and everybody.
Absolutely. So coming back to your twin flame and his choice that he has made, that he wants to follow the monkhood path. In my sessions where people are contacting me and discussing certain experiences and trying to sort their confusion, I have so far come across more than 20 to 25 people who have been going through a very similar setup, that they met their twin flame who is in the spiritual community doing a certain spiritual practice and following a path of monkhood, either in some Tibetan monastery or preached in the church or something where there is a specific spiritual organization, there are specific strict rules of that spiritual organization. The encounter has happened, the person is understanding the connection, but now they have taken this oath of following a certain path of being a monk, and they can't really deviate from that, and there is so much around that decision that they are dealing with. And then there is this twin flame person who is awakening, completely utterly confused in their path, and it is an added element in their journey that the twin flame doesn't want to be in a relationship because they can't. What is your understanding when it comes to this setup?
Interestingly, in my case, one of the things I started to realize with him is what a powerful being he is, my twin. So even along the time that I felt rejection and abandonment, because he was so nonchalant towards me after the intimacy, turned away from me, would turn towards me, turn away, turn towards me, turn away. Exactly a year after we met, he got initiated into becoming a monk. And that was really painful because I felt that I was cheated by life. That, my feeling was that life was playing a very cruel prank on me and that I got completely cheated by life. But interestingly, I was shown that again in my visions and my meditations that, the twin flame, in my experience, we're not one soul in two bodies. We are two individual souls. We just come from the same oversoul. That is why there's a soul recognition, which means that soul is on an individual soul mission. And my soul is on an individual soul mission. And so interestingly, what I realized was that his soul is on a mission to enter the monkhood matrix, the brahmacharya matrix, because it is a matrix. The repression that I'm talking about is worldwide. It's spread across society. This repression of human beings on all levels, mentally, physically, sexually. It happens all across the world, across societies. And this is what I've learned in my travels and working with other people from other cultures. is that it doesn't matter what culture you come from, everybody's repressed. The feminine is repressed
Yeah.
very deeply. And so the feminine doesn't mean women are repressed only. The feminine, even in men, is repressed because we both have the masculine and the feminine within us, right? The feminine is completely repressed in men. That's why they're so shut off from their heart chakra. They're shut off from their own intuition. And they completely work just with logic. They don't have that womb portal that we do where we can connect to the other dimension and bring in children. So it's very hard for men. They're not connected to their heart and to the other portals the way women are. So that's why it's so much easier for us. And that's why the feminine, the divine feminine, maybe we're the distorted feminine before till we wake up, but the feminine takes the lead because we are the ones that are still connected to our heart and our womb and to the portals of the other dimensions. So what I realized with him is that he's a very powerful being, and his soul mission is to enter that very repressive matrix of the monks and the monkhood, because not all monks are happy. They're not thriving because they go into it thinking that it's going to help them overcome their repression without realizing they're getting repressed even more. So sometimes they enter monkhood for the wrong reasons. And in his case, he was entering monkhood for a couple of different reasons, but one was definitely he was afraid of relationships and women because he had such bad karmic relationships with women, and it brought up a lot of that same fear of rejection and abandonment. And I saw that in our interactions, that fear of women. So even though he was madly in love with me, and I could see that, all of that was coming up, and I knew that part of the reason, it wasn't the full reason, but part of the reason that he went into monkhood is also so that he felt that it was a shield from the world, but it's not. Nothing can shield you from the world, and nothing can shield you from repressions. You have to face it within yourself, whether you're on the monkhood path or you're on the marriage path. So what I was shown is that on a multi-dimensional level, he has come here to explode the monkhood matrix, which means that he'd have to go into the path. He'd have to realize how repressed he is and how he's repressing his own sexual energy, which is the Shakti in him, and how he's repressing his personal power and just surrendering his power. So he has to wake up through that. And then eventually, maybe if he does the work, may come to the conclusion that having love for a woman and having love for your spiritual master and the divine, these are not mutually exclusive. It's one and the same. You cannot
Absolutely.
love the divine and then not love the woman. I mean, that's again the compartmentalization programming of the brain, right? Of the
Yes.
mind, of
Yes.
society. Your twin is the divine counterpart. Like everybody is the divine, and your twin is like standing in front of you as the ultimate divine counterpart, as a Shakti that's within you. And what is he doing? He's running away from it. What does most men do? They run away from that. And what do a lot of women do? They run away from the masculine, right? They run away from the Shiva principle that's in their twin. So that's what I saw for him. And then for me, I realized that my husband and I, this sacred contract we have is to explode the marriage matrix, because the marriage matrix comes with a lot of programming as well,
Yep.
immense programming. Sacred union of masculine and feminine is divine. Marriage is a 3D program. It comes with a ton of agreements and a ton of repression, and it's an institution of control. It's not needed as we ascend into 5D. We don't need marriage. Do we need sacred union between a man and a woman, the masculine, the feminine? Absolutely. That's going to go into 5D with us. But marriage as an institution where the state is involved as a third entity and gives you a marriage license, I mean, energetically, that is not going to go along with us. So
Absolutely.
I realized we both come to explore the matrices. Now he has his free will and I have my free will, and what we do with our path is our free will. So I don't know how this is going to converge, but at least that's the vision that I've been given, because it's important we implode these matrices. Like within the matrix are these smaller matrices, right? So we've come to change it. And the way we make that change is not by going out there and writing, like not by going out there and doing something specifically. We're making the transformation within. As we energetically make the transformation within and neutralize all the programs within, it changes in the collective consciousness. So that's the vision that I was given. And I know now what he's doing, and I know what a powerful mission he's on. And so now I've just blessed him. I've just released him completely. And I say, I bless him for success, you know?
Thank you for sharing that, because all those who are actually in this sort of a scenario, they need to imbibe this understanding, because many are functioning from the place of victimhood, that why me? Why God made this cruel joke on me? Or even this whole uncertainty in their mind that, oh, someday this person will wake up and they will come back to me in a relationship. So instead of they rising their awareness and understanding of the bigger picture, they are wanting to pull the person down into their current consciousness, which is the reverse process which keeps them in the loop. And I also wanted to mention about this Kundalini book that is written by Om Swami, the author Om Swami, who I think, in my understanding, he's the first person who has said something in a spiritual literature, that he spoke to so many people who are on the monkhood, who are not really happy with this idea of being celibate in their life only because they are on the monkhood. In the book called Kundalini, there is a little literature on that topic in the introduction, and I really appreciate that, because it takes a lot of courage for a spiritual person like him to say something like this. And when it comes to even this whole belief system where people say that if you really have to spiritually progress, then you have to be celibate, there is something in me that doesn't resonate with that, though I don't deny that completely. Okay, maybe some people naturally come to that state that they don't need to sexually active with anybody, but that whole idea of being celibate for your spiritual progress somehow does not, I mean, I feel it's unnecessary unless it really comes to you from within. Only by putting this in a suppressed kind of a forced, in some forced way.
If we're divine beings, which we are, why would we be given certain aspects of our existence, which is the sexual force and the sexual ability, which is very strong? It's not weak in human beings.
Yes.
You know, if they're really honest with themselves, the sexual power, the sexual force is a very strong force. The only reason that it's manifesting in all these distorted ways is because humanity is repressing it because they've been taught it's wrong and dirty. Why have you been taught that? Like, you have to ask yourself this question. And then why would you be given a strong power and force that courses through you by the divine if it's dirty? Like, you know? So you do have to question things on this path. A big part of the twin flame path is to question everything too. Right? And part of spiritual awakening is you have to question everything. Don't buy into dogma, you know? We truly are moving as we awaken. We're moving from religion to responsibility. And religion is religion of all types. It's not just Hinduism, Buddhism. I'm not talking just about that. It's like anything that has just been drilled into us from the outside over and over again that we got programmed with is a religion, because it stops you from asking critical questions.
Yes.
You can't, so many people are afraid of asking questions even just to themselves, because they're like, what if I get answers that'll get me into trouble, right? So
What do you feel is your soul calling or your mission?
the mission is also multifaceted. I don't think there's one mission per se.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say, like, speaking my truth is a part of the mission, you know, just standing in my truth and speaking my truth, regardless of the consequences. If I feel guided by the divine, I can't always see the big picture. The nature of being in this realm is that even if the veil has lifted a little bit, it's still a very foggy realm. It's very hard to see everything clearly. So the way that the divine guides us, or the higher self guides us, is just the next step and the next step and the next step. So I don't know if I have this big grand mission. I have no idea. I think what I've realized is that right now my mission is to continue the healing process. I'm still in the process. I'm still working on the heart chakra, and I'm still, you know, finding my way back to that deeper self-love and union with myself. You know, it's interesting because one of my guides, Babaji, he gave me an analogy. So you might know Babaji from Autobiography of a Yogi. He's the ageless, eternal yogi. So Babaji is one of my own guides and came to me last August around the time that my twin was getting initiated into monkhood and went into silence for initiation. Babaji came to me. And because I was in a very bad place within myself. I was in dire straits because I really felt cheated. I couldn't believe that he had gone ahead with it. And so at the time, when I was such a mess, I asked, when Babaji showed up, I asked him, Babaji, this heart's desire that I have, is this wrong? Is this bad? Like, is this bad? So he gave me an analogy. He said, no, your heart's desire is not bad at all. And he gave me an analogy of a sailboat. And he basically said that, think about a sailboat. I don't know how many people that are listening to this are sailors. I'm not, but my husband is. So I had to ask him for some clarifications after about this analogy. So he said, imagine a sailboat and with a sail. And where I live in Vancouver, I live on the ocean in a small neighborhood called Deep Cove. And he said a majority of people in their incarnation, when they're not master souls, right? Like us, like twin flames, they're just going from Deep Cove to Vancouver downtown in their sailboat and they're coming back. So they just have to do a little bit of like maintenance of the sailboat and it'll be fine. They don't have to do much, but it'll go from Deep Cove to Vancouver, Vancouver to Deep Cove. No big deal. He said, when you come here as a master soul, because you've come here to master yourself, is then your sailboat is going to go out into the open ocean, into the Pacific Oceans. So at that time, because I was also asking, like, where does divine will end and where does my will begin? It's really confusing for me because by divine will, I've met this being, and now this being is going and becoming a monk. And it feels like my own free will is completely crushed because I did whatever I could on my end to tell him the truth, to explain to him that we're twin flames. I felt like I did everything I possibly could, but yet he's gone on this path where it feels like there's no convergence. But my heart is telling me that there's going to be convergence. So I don't understand this. I feel very confused. So tell me, is my heart's desire wrong? And then where does divine will end? And where does my own personal free will begin? Because I have free will too as a human being. It's not just about surrendering to divine will. So then that's when he said, with the sailboat, when you come here as a master soul, you're going out on the open oceans. He said, you are the sailboat. You have this vessel, which is a sailboat. Your personal will is what will keep the sailboat clean. You have to make sure that any leaks that are there in the sailboat, you have to plug them. If the sails are torn, you have to fix them. You have to make sure the anchor works. You have to make sure the propeller works. So you have to do everything you can to make sure that all the leaks within you are plugged. So that means if we're carrying lower dimensional energies, lower vibrational energies, egoic energies, it's our work, right? It's our sadhana. It's our inner work that helps clear that sailboat out. And so that's how we plug the leaks. Everybody does inner work in their own way. We are usually guided as to how to do the inner work. There's no one way to do it. So that's how we plug the leaks of our sailboat. And then he said that the divine will is the wind that goes into the sails, that pushes the sailboat. So he said, when you're on the open ocean, don't think that you want to go to Tahiti or you want to go to Hawaii or you want to go to New Zealand as a specific destination. The divine will blow through your sails and it'll take you to the destination. And you may have multiple destinations. And all you have to do is you keep the sailboat clean. You keep it in top condition so that even if there's big storms in the ocean, you can ride the waves. You don't just sink and then you don't crash and you don't go under. And he said, that's what your free will do. And that's what your human will do. And that's how you should be using your energies. And then divine will take you where you need to go. So, and then I said, what about the heart's desire that I have? Is that wrong? Like this desire I have for my twin flame, this is wrong? He said, no, heart's desire is like the propeller on the boat. And I didn't know what propeller was because I'm not a sailor. So I asked my husband this. He said, the propeller speeds the boat up in the direction that it's going. So, that desire that we have to have reunion with the twin flame, it doesn't mean we have to get married to them or whatever it is. That is all social constructs. That desire to be in reunion, in harmonious union, whatever way it shows up, that's what's speeding up the journey. And that's my experience because I was already on the spiritual path. I was already awakening. I was already clearing lower dimensional energies through energy healing. But then he came and then boom, it was like another level of speed altogether into the wide open ocean. So I realized, oh, okay, that's how the mechanism works. So in terms of my mission, I don't know what's going to manifest. Right now, I'm being asked to be a medicine woman. So I've opened a wellness center. I'm helping people with healing and using very cutting edge technologies called the E system and scalar frequencies to help people heal in a deeper way. And I run sacred medicine journeys there. So in many ways, I'm a priestess of that temple of energy. So there's many multifaceted things. I'm also learning herbalism. I'm learning energy healing because I've done it on myself. I'm going to offer it to other people. So there's many things that are emerging, but I don't know, is that my mission? Maybe it is, but I think it's that same thing, like Babaji said, that sailboat. I'm just allowing divine will to blow me. I'll go to the next destination, the next destination. I'm happy. Like I've surrendered to that. Yeah.
Wow, that's such a profound message by Babaji and you. So, if there is anything that you want to share additionally to this,
Yeah, I'll share one last thing. Recently, like I would always see my twin all the time because he's always around the spiritual master or whatever that, and I'd always see him and it would trigger me immensely. And recently they were on some sort of pilgrimage again, and I kept seeing him every day on social media for almost 2 weeks straight. And this time it didn't trigger me at all. And I kept thinking, and like I knew the mechanism that every time I see him, some purging cycle is going to start. And that's exactly what happened. A purging cycle started. And I was purging more like lower dimensional energies. One of the things I started to realize is that I've come into complete acceptance for this mechanism. It's a very powerful mechanism. And, in my case, it was just 2 years. This September will be 2 years of us having met. Because I had a very strong foundation from before, I was able to like go through it, but it was very intense because I think what people experience over a decade, 2 decades, sometimes I experienced in such a compressed timeline that it did have a huge impact on my health, because when you're energetically waking up so quickly, the physical body, it took a big toll. So one thing I would share with everybody is that if ever you feel that like this is a cruel joke, rewrite that narrative. Just take a piece of paper and write, this is the biggest gift I can ever receive. Because you may not be able to see it now, but if you change the narrative in your mind, you'll start seeing the gifts in the journey. You'll start seeing it. The messages will come to you. The more you play into the victim mentality, which is a program, by the way, it's a very powerful program that's been put in place so that people just play small. If you just take a piece of paper and write down, I am a twin flame, and this is the biggest gift I can ever receive. You just write that down over and over and over again, and then you will start to see how your life will change, because you will move from that victimhood to starting to recognize the gifts of the journey. And this is how you break out of that victim loop, because it's a self-created loop. Because we feel like we're looping and that God is playing a joke on us. We are God. The reason we're looping is because in our thought process, we are creating that loop constantly by blaming it on the twin flame or blaming it on somebody else. There's nobody to blame. There's truly nobody to blame. So I want everybody to experience like the gifts of this journey. And I would say this is probably one hack. Like, honestly, if you just did that, like doors would open for you.
absolutely. Thank you so much. I definitely know that I'm going to invite you on some other occasion as well, after probably you might have reached another milestone in your journey and have a lot to share with everybody, like what happened after 2024 and how did the journey or your soul calling or your twin flame journey unfold um, further. So obviously this is not the first and the last time you are speaking here. I'm sure you will be coming here again and sharing. So thank you so much for coming and sharing on this wonderful, empowering session. That's all I can say.
Oh.